Hello and welcome to episode 369 of AvTalk. I am Ian Petchnick, here as always with
Jason Rabinowitz. Nice lead into that one. That was a good always with.
I feel good about that one. I feel like we're on firm footing for the rest of the episode now.
Yeah, there's only downhill from here then. Wait, no, you said this is going to be a good episode. I mean,
no, it's going to be a good episode.
I am traveling for work once again, but my Wi-Fi is stable because I'm not at a hotel. I'm in a recording suite. It's like sound treated, so if I clap, there's no echo. It's the ideal scenario. So I assume the power is going to go out in like 20 minutes.
Something has to happen.
Something has to happen.
Those are just the rules.
Because I had a miraculous easy flight on the way down here, which does not happen for me.
No, so this was the cursed route, and you were not cursed. Hold on, wait a second. There's a lot going on this week that's feeling very off because you made it from LaGuardia to Dulles without issue. You're in a recording space.
I haven't made it home yet.
Okay, but there's also breaking news before we hit stop on the recording.
We're even recording slightly earlier than we usually do.
This is bizarre.
Man, tomorrow getting home is going to suck. I'm using all of our positive energy now.
We're using it all up. So hopefully by the time the podcast comes out on Friday, Jason's still in one piece.
Hi.
Well, let's head up to Maribel, where Airbus teased a last-minute major announcement, told everybody, get to Montreal by 2 p.m. or else. And there was a lot of speculation that we were about to hear about the A220-500. But it seems that that's not the case. But nonetheless, a very interesting announcement. AirAsia has ordered 150 A220-300s. That is a firm order, the largest in A220 history. And it also takes the total A220 order book past 1,000 aircraft for the first time. Not only that, but they have ordered Airbus's newest cabin configuration for the A220, which will now seat up to 160 passengers through the inclusion of an extra overwing exit on both sides of the aircraft.
What this is not is a fuselage stretch to an A320-500 that was rumored hotly for the last 24 hours since we learned about this. This is not what that is, even though I feel like we've been talking about the A220-500 for a long time. This is not that. What it does, I think you may have just said, is they are installing another overwing set of exits, which enables them to add, 4 additional rows of seats at quite a tight seat pitch, but the aircraft will remain in the presumably 2-3 configuration that passengers love because it's so comfortable. But there is a great write-up of all of the possibilities leading up to what this announcement was from John Walton's The Upfront that I read yesterday at my sad Herndon, Virginia dinner alone, where my phone didn't work. But a great analysis of all of the things this could have been or might be in the future for what the A220 family of aircraft could be if they stretch, and could have been that announcement. It could have been a true supplement to the A320 Neo Max Pax configuration, but this is not that, which is surprising.
I think in less uncertain terms, we will see at some point an A220-500.
Absolutely.
I'm surprised that we didn't see it here with 150 firm orders.
Yeah, that's a lot. Not to say that they can't upgauge that order in the future. I mean, that's pretty common to see an airline put down a deposit or firm order for the smaller variant, and they'll upgrade in the future if and when that aircraft becomes available. But a little surprising to me that they go with this particular version of the A220, which is, of course, now the densest version of that aircraft, as Airbus has kind of been squeezing as much out of its existing airframes as possible. We saw that with the A350 new production standard, I think that Iberia was the first customer of, where they slimmed down the sidewalls to increase the amount of available space to plop seats down, which enabled some, I guess, moderately better than it would have been otherwise, configurations where they added an extra seat per row. But surprisingly, this is not that. It's just really difficult to get A320 Neos in any reasonable time frame. So if this is AirAsia's way to get higher capacity aircraft sooner rather than later, I guess this is what they got to do.
I mean, what's interesting to me, though, is that this is of enough necessity for AirAsia that they're willing to take that extra flight attendant along just for, I mean, obviously they've done the math and it works out for them. But going above that one, you're now adding an extra flight attendant.
Yeah.
Obviously the math works for them, but I'm interested to see if anyone follows along with this.
Yeah, I mean, we've seen airlines in the past do the exact opposite, where they take seats off the aircraft to not have to carry around that extra flight attendant. JetBlue notoriously did that, where it reduced the number of seats on board. American as well, not to give passengers extra room,
then they
but
undid
to not have to pay another costly flight attendant. This is, I guess, if AirAsia, their plan is to sell out to capacity these flights, then yeah, I guess it makes sense for them. Fascinating story arc for the C-Series, now A220. But the story continues, and one day, maybe still we'll see that A220-500, and maybe we'll see it at AirAsia too, and maybe with a whole lot more seats on board. It could actually have more seats than an A320, which is just kind of wild.
Now, the question becomes, which gets certified first, the A220-500 or the MAX 7?
Oh, I mean, they did physically manufacture some MAX 7s, right? They do exist.
They have flown.
But it's been a long time since we've heard anything about those. I would hope the MAX 7, but for Southwest's sake, at least.
Exactly. But we'll see. Let's switch over to Boeing and their big order news from last week, which was the Boeing Bangladesh order, the airline announcing its largest ever order, taking 8 787-10s, 2 787-9s, and 4 737-8 MAX.
Good for it. It feels honestly like just yesterday Biman was retiring its last DC-10, which please don't refresh my memory or remind me that was actually like 12 years ago. It feels like yesterday. So for this airline to be expanding very quickly from going from retiring this DC-10 to now topping up its already delivered fleet of 787s, it's quite the change.
Yeah, it's great to see their fleet refresh. I'm very interested to see what they're going to do with the 787-10s. See what they have in mind for those. If they use them as really, truly long-haul aircraft, or if they just do a Singapore regional 787-10.
Who really uses the 787 for ultra-long haul? It has less range than the smaller variants. So yeah, the Dash 10, not to get on a tangent, but has kind of become that regional and also transatlantic shuttle bus that the 9 is much more adept at ultra-long haul flying, but Biman will...
ultra long haul, yes.
Ultra long haul, but Biman will enter the domain or the prestige of being one of the few airlines that operates the 8, 9, and 10 variants of the 787. And there are not many airlines out there. I think United...
Do you get a special badge if you do that?
When you order this many 787s, you can get whatever badge you want. Whatever Boeing will do whatever makes you happy. But who's got the trio of 787s? I know British Airways does, United... Who else? I don't think there are many.
That's a really good question. We're going to have to give that one a think.
Top of my head is BA and American. I can't recall off the top of my head who else has that trifecta.
ANA.
BA.
Yes, let's see. Who else? Oh, hold on. Do we count Korean? Because Korean Air technically operates the government's 787 BBJ, which is a Dash 8.
No, that's cheating.
Let's see. Who else? I think
that's it.
Just had United. Did Royal Jordanian just order 9s, or did they also order?
I don't think they ordered 10s. Either way, they don't have them now. So
no, they don't have them now.
But I think it's a very not a big group of airlines.
There you go. Well, congratulations to Boeing Bangladesh, and be interested to see what they get on with their orders. Now, having gotten some good news out of the way, let's talk about the bad news that we expected to start with this week. And that is Spirit Airlines ceasing operations. The airline had difficulties financially for years prior to this. In the last weeks of its operations, the airline did its best to try and get a $500 million bailout from the government. The strings attached to that lifeline were not acceptable to the airline's creditors. And so the airline ceased operations last week.
I want to add something to that. What I thought was most interesting is that they didn't think that the investors who were already invested in Spirit didn't think, oh, the 500 million, we know it will help the airline, but if they do that, the government will take basically the number one position in getting paid back in Spirit's assets ahead of the existing creditors. So there was of no interest to them. If the airline, they pretty much were saying, yeah, we know the airline's going to shut down at some point sooner or later. And if and when that happens, really when, we don't want to be put further back in the line to get part of our investment back from the bits and pieces sold off of the airline, which I think was very telling. The writing was clear as day to them, and the investment just did not make any sense. Because we talked about before, 500 million these days for an airline, that's a pittance. That's not going to go far. So I'm really sad to see this happen, but it was inevitable and probably the right call at this point.
Yeah, I think at the point at which Spirit found itself last week, it became very clear that the airline could not continue and that $500 million would be enough for right now, but not much beyond that, given how high fuel has gotten and how far the price of jet fuel has climbed. But to Jason's point about the creditors wanting to not be pushed back, they would have been mostly pushed out if
so not
they
even
had taken
pushed back, but pushed out. Wow.
Technically pushed back, but the government would have taken such a large chunk and become so much of a creditor of first resort, really, that they would have been able to do much more with the pieces of the airline after it was gone. And we had talked about in the last episode how this was seen as a way, if they could get an airline to merge with Spirit, it could possibly make sense.
Yeah.
But no airline wanted any part of this. But in large part, because two other airlines, the pieces of Spirit are worth much more than
the sum of the parts
the whole.
is greater than the whole here. But it sucks. And a lot of pixels have been spilled over the impact Spirit has had over the decades. The Spirit effect, I know there are a bunch of airlines have had that X effect, whether it's Southwest effect, JetBlue effect, Spirit effect, but Spirit was truly the modern day inventor, let's say, of the ultra low cost carrier. There were others before it, much smaller, that ceased to exist. But Spirit, I'm not going to say democratized air travel or anything that dramatic, but it pioneered the unbundling where you buy a ticket and that's all you get. You get your butt and a seat that you don't even get to pick for free. You got to pay for that too. And it truly did bring down airfares for the competition, and airfares are going to go up in the absence of Spirit. And having flown Spirit a number of times myself, I will miss maybe not the airline, but having at least the option and knowing that it was there in case I needed it, which sometimes I did, where even Spirit's big front seat was substantially cheaper than the legacy competition's economy seat. So it sucks, and I hope the other low-cost carriers out there, now there are even fewer since Sun Country got gobbled up by Allegiant. The options are getting pretty slim for low-cost flying in the U.S. Thankfully, it's still a model that works in Europe. And of course, we just saw AirAsia, another ultra-low-cost carrier, ordering 150 aircraft. But in the U.S., low-cost flying is becoming more difficult to find.
Yeah. And to that point, Frontier today said that they are in a healthy enough financial position where the current high cost of fuel will not push them into severe financial difficulties the way it did with Spirit. So if you're looking for other ultra low cost carriers to stick it out, Frontier says that, yes, we'll be here for what we think is the long haul. So that was helpful to hear today.
Yeah. Speaking of helpful,
Yeah.
The other airlines in the country and even beyond the country stepping in to help out Spirit customers to varying degrees of helpfulness, I would say. Some airlines were prepared more than others, it would seem, but it was very clear that this was coming, and airlines were ready in the absolute dead of night to put out press releases and statements to help out passengers. Again, some more than others. I think a lot of the credit in my mind goes to United for having an actual customer portal to go to upload your trip confirmation from Spirit, and they would offer you discounted fares if you were a confirmed Spirit passenger, as opposed to some others who were like, yeah, we capped fares on Spirit routes. Go find them. There's no more information. Just go out there and find it. Whereas others, I think it was Avianca, Colombia, who just said, yeah, if you are a Spirit passenger, you can fly us for free. No big deal. We'll get you home. Because Spirit was not just a US-based airline flying in the US. It also had quite a sizable Caribbean and South American operation, or at least it used to back in the day. But
I mean, it did as of last week still.
yeah,
I mean,
it wasn't just, oh no, I'm stuck in Denver. It's like, oh no, I'm stuck in Cali, Colombia, and I got to get home. So a lot of airlines stepped up to varying degrees to fill that void, at least in the next couple of weeks. But it was good to see airlines offer some discounts or flexibility to get people home or wherever they were going.
yeah. And I also thought it was good on the airlines for what they did and are doing for Spirit employees. Anytime this happens, this is not the first time an airline has gone out of business, but often other airlines will make available positions, come apply to us, we'll put you in the head of the queue for applications and things like that. But there was one, Jason, I don't know if you saw this, where a Spirit pilot was supposed to operate his retirement flight
Oof.
the following day and obviously didn't, but got home on a Southwest flight. And as he was coming off the Southwest flight, they had gathered folks in the gate area as he stepped off the jet bridge to celebrate his retirement. And
I thought I saw they even arranged for a water cannon salute from the airport too.
oh, I didn't see that part.
I
but
think I saw that. So that pilot got
great.
everything they would have ordinarily gotten on a retirement flight, except for, the hassle of having to actually operate the flight. So there is that. But yeah, it is a lot of people. I think 17,000 directly employed people now out of jobs. And one thing I did want to highlight as well is it goes far beyond the 17,000 direct employees. Those are direct paid by Spirit Airlines as an entity employees. But I had no idea how we would even calculate how many contractors and third-party employees that were not officially Spirit employees, but ground handlers, catering, security, even airport employees. At least in New York at LaGuardia, Spirit had its own terminal. And anyone who worked in that terminal, well, they're not selling any hamburgers at the concession stands there in that terminal anymore. So those people aren't going to work. So even though they did not work for Spirit, they themselves, they might not be out of a job, but they're certainly not going to work now because there are no passengers in that terminal anymore. So it goes far beyond the 17,000 people. We haven't seen something like this, at least from an airline going into business in a long, long time. And I think the amount airlines have contracted out employees since People Express went out of business, whatever, decades ago, is dramatically different now. So you may see 17,000 people lost their jobs as the figure, but in reality, it's a lot more than that, which stinks.
Yeah. And that, to Jason's point about LaGuardia and them having their own terminal, Spirit is also one, because of its ultra low-cost carrier model, they fly to secondary airports. And so they are often the only commercial carrier at some of these airports. And so you have these secondary airports that are banking on the 3 times a week Spirit flight or what have you. And that's gone now. So I think that is a really good point, Jason, that, it's not just folks who collected a paycheck from Spirit, but it's also folks who collect a paycheck because of Spirit that are impacted by this.
So what else is happening in regards to Spirit? We are very quickly seeing airlines absorbing Spirit's route network. Is that where you were going?
Yeah, I was going to talk about where things are expanding, not just the route network, but also we can talk a little bit about where the aircraft are going and things like that.
Oh, yeah, we got to talk about that because they're in the air right now and they will be for a while.
Yeah, let's do the airline stepping in first. Go ahead
All
and
right.
lay the groundwork for us.
There's a lot at play here, but the biggest dot on the map right now that's up in the air is Fort Lauderdale, Florida. That was Spirit's biggest operational hub. That was their home base and an airport I know other airlines were trying to build up. And now JetBlue almost immediately has spun up a whole bunch of new routes and entirely new cities, actually. So JetBlue has spun up, hey, Cali, Columbia. I just mentioned that one out of sheer luck. Charlotte, North Carolina, Columbus, Ohio, Indianapolis, and a couple more Colombian cities, new dots on their map entirely. And on top of that, JetBlue's expanding out of Fort Lauderdale to Nashville, Detroit, Houston, Chicago, and Puerto Rico, secondary cities in Puerto Rico, and also expanding frequencies on routes it was previously Austin, Aguadilla, DFW, Raleigh, Durham, Santo Domingo, Santiago de los
Caballeros,
There we go. Thank you.
I'm here for
And
you.
also launching new service up to BWI, where JetBlue, I don't think served from San Juan, not from Fort Lauderdale, but from San Juan. So a bunch of new lines, a bunch of new dots from JetBlue. Very clear that they were planning this for the moment Spirit went out of business, because you can't just spin up new routes and new cities like that overnight. So at least right now, it looks like JetBlue, ironically, has the most to gain from the demise of Spirit after tangentially accidentally causing the demise of Spirit in the long haul. But that's a whole other story.
Yeah.
We've already talked about that for years.
Yes.
The TLDR on that one's basically Frontier was going to buy Spirit. JetBlue said, absolutely not. We're going to way overspend on Spirit. And they kind of snatched it away from Frontier. And then the government said, you can't do that. And then Frontier went away. Spirit became an independent entity, went bankrupt twice, and now is gone entirely. So really, yeah, this is JetBlue's fault.
Solid recap.
Okay.
The aircraft, on the other hand, are headed into long-term storage for the moment. This plays into which aircraft are available and which aircraft Spirit operates. So Spirit operates a combination of A320, A320neo, and A321 and A321neo aircraft. And all of those are basically headed into long-term storage at the moment. Folks like Steve Giordano and his crew, which are mostly using former Spirit pilots to move those aircraft from wherever they ended up, Orlando, Houston, Fort Lauderdale, Washington, wherever, moving them to storage facilities in Arizona and California, including Marana and Victorville and Goodyear. Those aircraft are being moved over the next few weeks. They'll get returned to the lessors, and I'm sure the lessors are already remarketing those aircraft, because the longer they sit, the more they cost the lessor and the less money they make. So I would not be surprised if you even saw some airlines pick up a bright yellow A320neo
Go,
with no
I wonder
signage
who
on it.
it came from. But yeah, these companies who move airplanes are very busy right now. Steve Giordano, who you just mentioned of Nomadic Aviation Group, posted on LinkedIn just the other day that it's been a crazy 72 hours. They're currently representing 4, maybe 5 of the about dozen lessors that own Spirit Metal, which is crazy that there are maybe a dozen entities that own Spirit's aircraft that they operated. But just the sheer amount of stuff they have to do in this post. The lawyers, airport officials, ground handlers, do they have the right tow bar, the coordination, getting pilots to the right place, and all this they have to do, kind of a race against the clock, because some aircraft, once the check comes up for it, once a maintenance interval is due for that aircraft, it can't go anywhere, easily at least. So some of these aircraft, they've got to move a lot quicker than others, but the 2 Spirit aircraft I saw at LaGuardia on my way out yesterday, they didn't look like they were going anywhere at the moment. One, of course, wasn't even in yellow livery. This was another legend of Spirit, that it took forever for it to paint its aircraft. So one of the 2 at LaGuardia was still in the sloppy S white livery before they rebranded to going banana yellow. So that one might be a little more valuable than the others because it's a little less offensive to the eyes.
I'm sure that's exactly what it is. What color the paint is.
Yeah, less paint. Paint's expensive.
This is true. This is true. Let's leave Spirit for the moment, and I'm sure we will return to what happens to Spirit and how other airlines fill the void in future episodes.
Man, there are 4 in the air right now. That's crazy.
In an update on an investigation that stalled out in June of 2025, when Chinese authorities decided to withhold the annual interim report that was due under ICAO Annex 13 on the crash of China Eastern Flight 5735, citing threats to, quote, national security and social stability. The annual interim report was withheld, and we assume won't hear one this coming June either. However, the NTSB performed the analysis of the flight data and cockpit voice recorder in their laboratory because of the damage that was incurred during the crash. The data that they collect and hold on to is responsive to Freedom of Information requests after either when the final report for an international accident is released by the lead investigatory agency or 2 years after the accident. So someone FOIA'd that data. And the NTSB this week published that on its, I didn't know this existed, but they have a specific Dropbox for FOIA materials. And so you can go and download the entire package. And what the flight data recorder data tells us is that both fuel control switches for the CFM56 engines attached to the 737-800 were moved to cutoff at the same moment. Then downward force was applied to the control column. There was no attempt, at least in the FDR data, to recover the aircraft. The FDR data only covers from 29,000 feet, which was cruising altitude, down to about 25,000 feet, because the FDR does not have a battery backup and therefore stops recording when the engine generators stop because the engines have been turned off. The cockpit voice recorder, which we don't have the transcript from, continues recording because that is equipped with a battery backup.
Do we know who submitted the FOIA request for this content?
I don't believe we do. No.
Smart thinking for whoever did that. I don't know the mechanics of how this works, but I wonder if they'll make the transcript of the CVR available at some point. That could also obviously be quite telling. I'm a little conflicted on this. I mean, the law is the law. The NTSB has to follow the Freedom of Information laws here. But I'd imagine China's probably not too happy about this. And I feel like it might damage the potential relationship in the future where maybe they don't send the next recorder to the NTSB for readout. Or maybe at this point they clearly care, but maybe they don't care enough that this got out because it was going to happen eventually. But this is sticky.
So this is interesting. In addition to the flight data recorder report that the NTSB released, they also released some of the correspondence, and it's heavily redacted, but some of the correspondence between NTSB investigators and their counterparts in China, and some various correspondence between other parties to the investigation, but mostly the counterparts on the investigative team in China. And as this anniversary came near, the lead investigator, or one of the investigators of the NTSB, sent an email to their counterpart in China that said, hey, this is the law in the United States. Just so that you're aware, no one's asked us yet, but if someone asked us, we are bound to apply the law and make this available.
And sure enough, exactly that happened. They were prepared for this. They knew it was going to happen.
Right. If it was a surprise, it should not have been a surprise. They were very clearly warned. And in the response email, they, acknowledged that this was a possibility.
We were all reading between the lines. We all kind of figured what happened. It was pretty clear that the Chinese authorities were never going to release a full report at this point or fess up, but we all kind of assumed. And again, you still have to read between the lines with even what the NTSB put out here, but it's pretty clear cut what happened, unfortunately.
So the data from the FDR, so the entire file is, I think, something like 300 megabytes. And of course, there's no way to link to the entire file. There's no
No, of
there's
course
no
not.
URL because it's in some, I assume, Microsoft file
Some
structure. It's
database that you
impossible.
dare not link to because links
Right.
didn't exist when that was created.
So on the blog post that we have related to the accident, I've put some of the FDR readout panels on the blog post, and those would be visible. We'll put a link to that in the show notes. In much more recent China Eastern news, what in the world happened in Shanghai this week?
That is the only reasonable reaction to this news. We were looking at this video over and over and over before we started recording to try to figure out what the hell happened. But there is now an A350-900B-324W, which is going to be out of service for probably a very, very, very long time after, I guess you could call this a run-in with the jet bridge, but that's being charitable. I would call it a Hulk smash repeatedly into a jet bridge to the point where I thought the video was looping, but no, the aircraft jammed into the jet bridge like at least 3 times and demolished the jet bridge.
So we don't know what happened yet. Hopefully we will see a report. Initial reports from Chinese sources say that there was an issue with the aircraft's brakes as it was pulling into the gate. And then because of that, the aircraft used reverse thrust to try and not hit the jet bridge after already hitting the jet bridge. But then when they stopped reverse thrust because the brakes didn't work, they just went forward back into the jet bridge again. I'm laughing because no one was hurt. And that's the important thing here.
Except the pride of these pilots in an A350-900. But maybe it could have been worse, of course. It could always be worse. But there's actually
They could have silver
more...
streaked.
Yeah, they could have gone right through the window. But I am seeing, oh, wow, there's another video in that I don't know if you've seen that I'm watching now, but has a different side view where you can indeed see the reverse thrusters deployed, then they are stowed, and then the aircraft goes forward again because the engines are still producing thrust, but they have apparently had no brakes, and the aircraft lurches forward again, and then they deploy reverse thrust again and close reverse thrust, and then the aircraft goes forward again. And then the video goes on to them, the wing demolishing the jet bridge. And then there is video from inside the aircraft of a passenger recording the very high resolution tail camera of the aircraft on board the aircraft as the flight attendants watch in horror.
Oh my goodness.
Aircraft demolishes the jet bridge.
Oh my goodness.
And it's being shown on the bulkhead monitor so everyone can see it whether or not they want to. But wow, the chain of events, I guess, makes sense. If for whatever reason the brakes went out, they needed to apply that reverse thrust for a little bit longer to get farther back from the jet bridge, but then they just kept rolling forward. Ouch.
Yeah.
What do you do in that situation? Just hope somebody throws some...
I think you did what they did.
In front of the... Yeah. You'll have to link to the video that has the multiple clips here because it's kind of hilarious watching the flight attendants watch what's happening in horror, knowing there's nothing they can do. But man, they will fix this aircraft. It will get back in service after a couple of months.
The Airbus AOG team will certainly do their best to get this aircraft back in the air. We can't necessarily say the same for the jet bridge.
Yeah, they're going to need a new jet bridge. But yeah, Airbus is certainly going to want to look into this because a simultaneous failure event of all of the braking systems on an A350, that cannot be a likely event.
Yeah, that's not great.
That's not great at all. Because this thing I'm very quickly reading here has a screenshot of the braking system readout for the A350, which apparently there are 5 redundant systems. So for all 5 of them to go offline and completely conk out, that's a failure mode Airbus is going to want to look into.
Yeah. We'll see if that is in fact what happened.
Yeah, we don't know.
And if anything else contributed to this repeated battering of this poor jet bridge.
Mm-hmm.
Let's head back to the US now in what I guess in any other week would certainly be the thing that we had talked about first. But here we are 40 minutes into the show, and we're just getting to the fact that a United 767-400ER struck a delivery truck on approach to Newark.
Did we almost forget to talk about this?
So
I
much
think we
has
did.
happened this
I
week.
think we did because we were supposed to have a seamless transition from the
Yep.
A350 taxiing to something else entirely. But I guess we can go to Newark, the crown jewel.
I think we need to stick with things hitting things they're not supposed to hit.
Man. So, yeah, a United 767-400 approaching Newark's runway 29, I believe. Yeah, apparently clipped a streetlight, I guess a light mast over the New Jersey Turnpike. We don't know which of the 27,000 lanes of the Turnpike that actually occurred on, but also either the light post then hit a truck or the aircraft itself hit the tractor trailer on the
Or
New Jersey
both.
Turnpike, or both. It's really unclear what exactly happened there. Optical illusions are definitely at play with the video because, again, what we're seeing is video from a distance, and there are a lot of lanes of traffic, so it's hard to figure out exactly what was where. But there was dash cam video from the truck that was hit. I kind of joked at first when this first happened, like, oh, I can't wait to see the dash cam video of this, not thinking that the dash cam video would come from the truck that was hit
Yeah.
almost immediately. Like, I thought it was fake at first because I'm like, there's no way that we're getting video from the recorder itself that quick, because usually the first thing you see is like someone pointing their phone at a monitor, not the actual video exported from the device. But the driver of that truck was okay. The 767-400 is not okay. It's got a gash in its fuselage from hitting a light post and a truck, probably, maybe. Landed without incident. They actually didn't even know about it until they got to the gate when someone said, hey, you got a hole in the side of your plane. It's not great. Also, you're missing a wheel, which is not great. But this could have been a lot worse and was very, 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 very close to being a lot worse.
I mean, a few feet close.
Inches. I would say even probably inches at this point, centimeters, if that's your thing. But this is Newark 29 is one of those approaches where aircraft are extremely low over the highway because there is basically no room between the threshold of the runway and the service road and the turnpike itself. I don't want to say it was bound to happen at some point because hopefully you don't ever hope to see this. You don't ever want to see this, but it's not the first time something like this happened. It won't be the last time, but man, I cannot believe it actually happened and no one was injured. Seriously.
Yeah. Thankfully, the truck driver only suffered minor injuries from glass that shattered during the whatever impacted the truck. From the lane of traffic that the truck was in to the threshold of the runway is 564 feet. To the touchdown point, to the center of the touchdown zone of the runway is 1,600 feet.
That ain't much. Obviously, the aircraft was lower than it needed to be. It was a very gusty day in New York. I will say that. I'm not making excuses for them because it shouldn't happen regardless. But this is one of those non-precision an ILS approach. There's a lot of variability in aircraft height coming to this crosswind runway, but I've seen a lot of mainstream article posts and even blog posts from prominent bloggers of like, what are they going to do with this approach in the future? Like, can this stay a thing? And like, yeah, there's nothing they can do about this. The airport is bound because it's New Jersey, literally bound by highways. There is nowhere else to go unless you take 5 lanes away from the turnpike. And you can't take lanes of road away in New Jersey. Like, that just is not one last stand. So
That's against the Constitution.
Against the Constitution of the state of New Jersey. There is nothing that can be done here other than barring aircraft of certain size from landing on that runway, but it doesn't matter because any aircraft of any size can be below the glide slope or whatever slope for this non-precision approach. Like, it is what it is. The pilots operating the flight are on administrative leave until the NTSB investigates, but it probably ain't going to be too good for them. Yikes.
The NTSB, for its part, in multiple statements, has said that the aircraft hit a light pole.
They never said it hit a truck.
Yes.
So we don't know. It's possible. Well, we're going to have to wait and see what they have to say. I still think the light pole hit the truck, not the airplane. But either way, it was damn close. And they are lucky. They are lucky that aircraft hit a light post because those are breakable. They are on mounts that literally, they are designed to do that. Even though it's not airport property, light posts on surrounding roads typically are breakable for drunk drivers or whatever else. They are designed to break away, but there are plenty of other things on that highway that are not meant to do that. And right around that area, there is a large sign mast that is made out of very not breakable steel, that if the aircraft hit that, it would probably be a very different story. Might have taken a chunk of the landing gear or part of the fuselage off. I don't know, but there was a lot of luck involved in this one.
Yeah. I mean, I've watched the video from the on-airport security cam or CCTV that's pointed towards the runway. And the footage is, I mean, too grainy to really make any serious judgments on it. But looking at that, I can't help but wonder if, because in the dash cam video from the truck, you see the wheels of the aircraft. You see it outright directly out the window of the truck. So I'm wondering if the wheels of that aircraft or part of the aircraft passed in between the truck trailer and cab.
Yeah, there was a lot of luck here.
I mean,
unfortunately, the best view of this incident, aside from the dash cam in the aircraft itself, there is actually a traffic camera in the median of the highway that's pointed directly at this approach, but it does not record. So that precious video is lost to the pixels of the internet over time and can never be seen by anyone ever again. But if someone was watching that camera at that moment, they got the best view possible, but it's gone forever.
Well, I think we'll eventually learn what happens, and we'll wait for the NTSB preliminary report in about a month's time. So beginning of June, we'll tune back in to see what the NTSB has to say about this. In the meantime, let's come to Chicago, where if you are a pilot who doesn't want to fly anymore, or you used to be a pilot and you can't fly anymore, British Airways wants to give you between $90,000 and $100,000 to taxi its 777s and 787s from one terminal to another.
Oh, this is the most Chicago thing ever, since I don't think there are many airports in the world still like this, but I believe, is it still the case where all inbound international aircraft have to go to Terminal 5?
All inbound international aircraft, unless you get pre-clearance, land at Terminal 5.
And then they got to be dragged across the taxiways, which at some points, like we saw last week, could be really problematic during bad weather. They got to bring it to whatever terminal the outbound flight is operating from. And somebody's got to be there to taxi that aircraft. But my question is, why do they need an actual full-blown pilot for this, and not just like a super tug driver and someone to ride the brakes in the flight deck? Why do they need an actual pilot for this?
Maybe this is cheaper than having the tug bring it all the way across.
So like they're going to put a pilot in this thing and someone is going to like actually power up the engines, and under its own power, this aircraft is going to go from T5 to wherever?
I think that's what they do now. So I went a little maybe too far into this to look at the taxi path for the BA flights from T5 to T3. As one does. And it's definitely a taxi back, stop, then taxi forward to the other gate. So I think that's what they're doing now. I'm going to have to, next time I'm at the airport, I'm going to see if I can watch and see what happens to the BA aircraft. There are some airlines that don't do that do have the aircraft tugged over. But also Lufthansa has probably the biggest problem out of any airline at Chicago, because they have the 747-8, which can only taxi on certain taxiways, and the farthest to go, because they have to go from T5 to T1, and a gate at T1 that is about as far from T5 as you can get.
So speaking of as far as you can get, I guess, is this as far as we're going to get towards single pilot operation of a commercial aircraft? One person in the flight deck driving the plane under its own power?
You don't even need to have a current pilot's license, which is interesting to me. This is really like if you are a pilot or used to be a pilot who doesn't want to fly anymore, but still wants to drive a plane.
What if you have no flying experience whatsoever, but like just think it's really cool to drive?
I think you should apply, Jason. I think you should apply.
You're local, so you first. But what a world where taxiing an aircraft under its own power could potentially be cheaper than a super tug and like someone riding the brakes. Maybe not anymore.
Not anymore. So let's...
You see where I'm going with this?
I do see where you're going. That's a really good segue, because guess how much fuel costs have risen in the month of March in the U.S.?
I'm going to go with exactly 56%.
It's almost like you read the Bureau of Transportation Statistics report that came out today.
I did. I did.
Oh,
But
well, there
not
you go.
only are US airlines using more fuel than this time last year because they're operating more flights, but they are paying a lot more for it. I guess surprising no one, right?
It makes sense here. Fuel costs for March 2026 were up 56.4%, and the cost per gallon was up 30.9% from last month, up to a total of $3, or an average total of $3.13 per gallon, which is per gallon thing always bugs me because that's not how we
Not how airlines measure it.
measure fuel, but that's whatever. We'll take numbers as we get them.
In the grand scheme of things, it is interesting when you plot it on the chart for the last 6 years. This is not the most expensive fuel cost per gallon has been in recent history. It peaked in like midsummer 2022 at quite a bit higher than it is now, but the cost is really not looking like it's coming down anytime soon like it did back in 22.
Yeah, I mean, I think there's structural difference between what we saw
Yeah.
up to summer 2022, which was a huge run up from, I mean, historically low at the beginning of 2020, and then cratering as 2020 went on, and then slowly ramping up through the fall of 2020 into the summer of 2022, where you had the highest over the past few years. But airlines in the US are dealing with this, going back to the low cost carriers. The Association of Value Airlines is still asking the federal government for help. I'm not sure if the number is still 2.5 billion or if they've come up with a different number this week, but they still want money. On the flip side of things, the Airlines for America, which is the, I guess, full service carrier trade group, says absolutely not. We've been able to help ourselves. They should be able to help themselves. To that end, they say that's not a level playing field, which, coming from A4A, is an interesting statement, but sentiment nonetheless. Over in Europe, will they have jet fuel? Won't they have jet fuel? In Lufthansa's first quarter earnings statements today, or speaking on the release of the first quarter earnings statements, Lufthansa Group CEO Carsten Spohr said, "We're worried, and we would like the European Union to do a few things to make it a bit easier for us to operate through the summer." Spohr wants three things. He wants the allowance of Jet A fuel instead of Jet A1. He wants the European Commission to suspend the use it or lose it slots at airports in Europe, and he wants exceptions to the anti-tankering rules. So right now there are rules in place that say you can't buy fuel where it's cheap and bring it where it's not cheap, because that would be unfair. So they want exceptions to those rules. The European Commission, for its part, says will provide updated guidance, quote unquote, soon.
Oh, cool. No rush. No rush, guys. It's fine. Yeah. This seems to waffle back and forth every day between like Europe's going to run out of fuel this summer and other analysis saying don't even worry about it, won't be a problem for quite a while. Things seem to change day by day. We certainly can't tell you when the flow of jet fuel from the Middle East is going to be resuming. No one can tell you that anytime soon because the situation changes or doesn't change minute by minute. It's not worth you as a passenger worrying about yet. It will be if things keep trending like this at some point in the near future, but there's just nothing you could do about it right now.
Speaking of the situation in the Middle East, we have our first look at one of the Mahan Air 777s that
Ugh.
the airline had recently illicitly obtained. We've covered that saga, I think, pretty well over the past few months, where it basically toppled the government in Madagascar because they used a company there to get those aircraft eventually into Iran, and it did not go over well. Well, one of those is no longer an aircraft.
An airplane? It is
Yeah.
no longer an airplane. It is burned down.
Yeah, it's in at least two pieces at the moment. So out of the 5 777s that Iran acquired, they're at least down to 4.
Yes, this was EPMTC, I believe, was its EPMTC was its most recent registration. Originated life at Singapore Airlines, went to Nook Scoot, and then I guess it was going to go back to Singapore Airlines, never did, and then somehow ended up in Iran because, we know that story, how that ended poorly.
If they wanted to replace it with something, maybe they could go with the world's largest RC A380.
I mean,
they're not that much smaller.
I feel like this thing is almost as big, if not bigger, than a Honda jet, like an actual private jet.
I don't know if it's that big, but it's big. It's bigger than a car, for sure.
You could fit humans in this thing. If this was a fuselage that was actually like you could go inside of, you could fit people in that. I don't know what its max takeoff weight is because it's still an RC plane, but it is definitely big enough to uncomfortably house people inside.
Uncomfortably house people inside, like a Honda jet.
Oh, nice.
We'll put a link in the show notes to just this ridiculous RC A380 that someone built and painted in the Lufthansa 100th anniversary livery. It's massive.
My favorite part of the video is when they're taxiing under its own power and they smash the wing into a tree because it's that big. Like it's bigger, wider than the driveway for their vehicles, and damaged a tree. I think the airplane damaged the tree, not the other way around, because it's that big in our RC airplane. It is. I mean, if you didn't know it was an RC aircraft and you're watching this video, you would have just been like, yep, that's a video of an A380 at an air show.
Yep, absolutely. You absolutely would. Check out that link in the show notes. If your interests are more genteel, you should stop listening to this episode now.
A different transition here. Speaking of uncomfortably housing people inside of an airplane.
Oh, God.
Now you can continue.
If stories about janitorial necessity are not your cup of tea, feel free to stop listening now. We thank you for making it this far into the episode, and we'll see you next week. If the confluence of aviation, unfortunate circumstances, and pilots with a very, very hard decision to make are your sort of thing, and you find this interesting, Jason, what happened to Envoy Flight?
One of my favorite modern things right now is a Blue Sky account called A Cars Drama. That this is a relatively recent development where A Cars messages that of any level of interest, which are basically these short text messages that pilots can send between dispatch, operations, whomever, to their little flight management computer on board. Usually it's pretty mundane, like, hey, how bad is Newark looking? Or like, hey, we need more fuel, or we're diverting, or whatever.
What are the sports scores?
Exactly. It is free-form text. They can say whatever they want, and this Blue Sky account just posts whatever pops up. But this one from May 1st, I will read it in its entirety. OSKRIC packs in 19D pooped all up and down back of aircraft and aft lav. Poop everywhere. Masks being given to packs. Is this a divert back to ORD QQ? I believe the QQ at the end of that means quick question. Should have led with that. Could have just said QQ, poop everywhere, divert, question mark. But what I love about this is how real time it is. When I saw this, pulled up Flight Radar 24, looked for what I assumed was an aircraft going from ORD to RIC. And indeed, when I looked it up, that aircraft was already on its way diverting back to ORD. So apparently the quick question was quickly answered. There was too much poop inside this airplane and it had to go back to Chicago.
Oh, will the wonders never cease, Jason?
What a business. I need Flight Radar 24 to incorporate these ACARS messages straight in the app, because some of them, 99% of them are mundane nothing, but every now and then you see one of these and it just brings the entire ecosystem together of like, oh, that's why that plane is squawking 7700 and returning to Chicago. They got too much poop. And that's where we're going to end it for this week. Ian is speechless, so.
I'm going to hit stop on the recording and I'm going to go talk to our product development team. Jason, whatever we talk about next week, I'm sure whatever good travel, whatever will have been used up. And I apologize in advance.
Oh, thank you.
But I hope you make it home safely.
Thank you. Thank you.
And without too much poop.
Well, I will be on an E175. So
good luck.
Hope it's not that
This has been episode 369 of AvTalk. I am Ian Petchnick here, as always, with
Jason Rabinowitz. Thanks for listening.